Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, Season 4, Episode 16. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our special guest in this episode is Alison Sunstrum, tech entrepreneur, investor, community builder, and a bunch of other things that are just pretty amazing. How and where did you meet Alison, Sylvain?
Oh, my goodness. At CDL. And 4 years ago.
The Creative Destruction
Lab.
That you
at the University of Calgary.
And you've talked about that before. You go down and you're a judge and an advisor, right? So just to frame that real quick for the folks, right?
Yeah, we're all mentors, but obviously Alison plays a much broader role as an investor, as a founding partner of CDL. I mean, without her, we wouldn't have a CDL in Calgary at all. And so she's the go-to person when it comes to structuring CDL. And frankly, every time we look at a venture, people go to her for some advice. In most cases, I mean, I just been quite impressed by the aura around Alison, because she's not just a heavy involved person in the community. She's really a legend, and so I was very pleased that she quickly accepted our invitation, and so because her time is precious. I mean, she's a busy woman.
Yeah, I think we used up about $1 million worth of her advice.
Probably.
So you, the listeners...
And I won't get an invoice.
And you, the listeners, have a real treat coming up. So stay tuned for that. I'm just back from, literally just off the plane, back from the Big Apple at the NRF.
And how was the Big Apple?
Show. The Big Apple's great. We had, on the Saturday, I've been there since Friday. It was freakishly warm on the Saturday. It was like 14 degrees Celsius. So it was pretty wonderful. Then it kind of chilled out when we left today. It was kind of like it was here today. So at this tech conference, they had a restaurant innovation zone, which was pretty mediocre, pretty small. It was a pretty small part of it, actually. But there's a couple of things that were really cool. There was some shop it like you stole it tech, walk in, walk out kind of technology that's quite common in convenience stores now. But they did have this robot that was making French fries. And
is that what you sent me? Oh,
yeah, I sent you that. So watch that robot. Like it twigged my interest because, we talk about, how do you find somebody to work in kitchens and can you replace it with a robot? This thing just never stops making French fries. So it was pretty cool. And they had a lot of vending technology. I don't think vending technology gets enough respect, I might say, because it's pretty cool vending technology. And vending machines. I buy my cake at the airport. It's my little tradition.
What did you find as innovative for vending machines? Something that we haven't seen before?
Well, I just think that the marketing of it and the freshness of it. So a small example, Buddy Velasco's Cake Boss has a vending machine at Pearson Airport in Toronto.
Yeah, and I saw that last week.
I always bring home a fresh piece of cake. Is that, the
you
technology...
You buy something from that machine? Really?
And I do, and it's delicious cake. Is it? Yeah, it's temperature controlled. I
thought those cakes were green for a reason, but
they're green, celebrating the color of green. But no, they're delicious cakes, and in many parts of the world, vending machines really solve a lot of problems. I mean, I saw some vending machine technology that actually makes hamburgers, like right from raw meat, and has this contained, doesn't have a lot of smoke. So basically, you make yourself a delicious tasting hamburger as if it was made on in a greasy spoon kind of thing.
Wow. Amazing.
There was a vending machine a little while ago that made French fries, but it kept catching fire, which kind of is counterproductive to, good things. But I think they're making big strides forward in that you could have a self-contained thing that grills and cleans the air and works and controls for grease and all that stuff, but yet it tastes like a great burger kind of thing, So, I like the cake. I wouldn't hesitate. The cake's not made in the vending machine in this case, but that's what innovation looked like. And then on the Sunday, I did a tour for retailers from Canada who were in at this conference, and we do a store tour. And one of the stores we went to was Petco, which has 1,500 locations in the U.S., Mexico, and Puerto Rico. They actually have a joint venture here with Canadian Tire, so you might see a Petco brand in a Canadian Tire. Okay. So they launched this new store called Petco Union Square. If you're in Manhattan, go to this store. Here's how that connects to us. You walk into this store. It's a wonderful store. You look right. There's a kitchen, a full serve, always 18 hours a day, staffed with Chef Kitchen for dogs. So they have fresh food everywhere. But if maybe your doggo's got an allergy or doesn't like something, you can go in and they'll make you custom food for the doggo. And it is quite the kitchen. Yeah. And people were just jammed in there. It was a really wonderful story.
Did you look at price points? Did you look at how expensive it was? Was it affordable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Listen, if you're getting fresh food made by a chef for your dog, you're not on a budget, or maybe you are on a budget, but your priority is your pet's health. So, listen, of course it was expensive. So they had
catering
3 zones.
For dogs.
They had 3 zones. Make it fresh, chilled. Like, a lot of people buy their food fresh, the food for the dog, fresh food as opposed to in a bag. And then they had frozen. And then they had like bulk dispensers of doggy biscuits. And anyway, so very interesting, great store. If you're in Manhattan, be sure and check out. And then,
did you buy anything for your dog?
I did, because at the center of the aisle for Ziggy, they had what they called 17 and Bark. It's at 17th Street, and they called it 17 and Bark, and it was all local made product for the doggo. So I bought him. I don't want to say it too loud; he'll overhear. I bought him this really cool big dog biscuit that's shaped like a New York cab. Like it's just a thing you get from New York, right? So,
right.
And then I went to, and this is super interesting, I went to Wegmans. And so some of you may know Wegmans, some of you not. It's a Rochester-based, much loved, actually, very well-respected grocer.
Yeah, very well loved, yeah.
They opened up a store in the Hart Astor Place in a building. And the store is just fascinating, Sylvain, because, there's some stuff we would imagine, but the zones, and they try to incorporate New York vibes around tiling. But then when you go in and look at their bespoke fish, their bespoke meats, all the portion sizes are for New Yorkers. So you can get, I was looking at this portion of snow-cured Wagyu beef. I don't know what that is. Maybe
snow-cured Wagyu beef.
And it was a cube, an inch by an inch cube, prepackaged, 1 inch by 1 inch. It was $239 a pound for this, but it was portioned out in these little cubes. So that's a kind of a ridiculous example, but they had a lot of their food, very super fresh food, portioned out for New Yorkers who don't have maybe big fridges. Maybe they're living on their own. Maybe it's a couple. Anyway, 2 places connected to our podcast that are worth a visit in New York City. If you ever have a chance.
Great visit then. Yeah, not too bad.
It was a great visit. All right, let's get in the news. What do we start with?
News.
Let's start with the Red Sea troubles. Bells are ringing, rockets are falling as the Iranians get their lackeys, the Houthis, to start messing with the supply chain around the world. So I guess
we're having problems with Panama Canal, so why not screw around with the Suez Canal? Huh?
Well, right, maybe the Suez Canal. I guess our friends in supply chain who are very, very talented, maybe they were getting bored or something dealing with the pandemic supply chain. So.
Well, you're looking at delays, 10-day delays at the port of Halifax in Montreal. So it's going to cost more money to you have to go around Africa, basically. That's why the Suez Canal exists in the first place. The difference between, you remember a few years ago when that tanker actually blocked the Suez Canal? It took 6 days for the canal to get rid of that bottleneck, but this bottleneck is way more, way more contentious. So this is a problem. Logistically, the world is in bad shape because of climate change and, of course, geopolitics, and so it's a problem right now. Things are slow. We've got inflation numbers this week from StatsCan. Things are flat. We were expecting the food inflation rate to continue to drop, but this is not going to help, especially in the winter time. There's lots of food being transported on those ships.
Right.
And my guess is that they're going to have to recoup some of those costs, extra costs due to the delays and things like that. And I suspect that some of the cargo will go to waste.
Speaking of things that don't help food inflation, you did an interesting post on social media. Was it in France where the government mandated price freezes, and then the the inflation rates came out and they went up, not down. So, and you were long saying, "Listen, this isn't going to help."
Well, the food inflation rate France did go down since August, September, but it's still at 7.2%. It is still quite resilient. So it's not really. I mean, we basically saw the French government freezing the price for 5,000 products. That's a quarter of everything people buy in France, basically. So one would think that the impact would be quite significant, and it wasn't. In fact, our own food inflation rate dropped even much faster than in France. The bottom line, if you meddle around food prices at retail, that's what happens. It never works, and I'm curious as to why the media is not talking about this all that much in France, not just here, but in France. I couldn't see any headlines there, so it really caught a lot of people's attention in August, September. But since then, nothing.
It's kind of died out. You're absolutely right. It's completely. The only thing I've been hearing from France is Carrefour's stop sell on the PepsiCo product.
Yep.
Which is, everybody's, oh my God, it's never happened before.
Oh my God.
Both of us are like, it happened here, but whatever.
Exactly. So anyways, whatever. things are tight, but I think everyone listening to this podcast gets very nervous as soon as we see governments intervening with market conditions, for sure.
Let's talk about RBI. They bought their biggest franchise, Carroll Restaurants, for $1 billion. Now, why?
They bought a franchisee.
A franchisee, right. So they bought a franchisee who owns franchises, right? Like one of these master franchisees. Now, what would compel them to do something like that? Because I've worked for franchisers and franchisees before, and they're kind of two different worlds. And what do you think's behind that?
Well, I think it boils down to control. I mean, it's much easier when you own outlets. I mean, that's the difference between the Tim Hortons model and the Burger King model. The Burger King model is all about massive conglomerates of restaurants being controlled and owned by one franchise. The average franchise owner, Burger King, will own at least 150 restaurants.
Wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
At Tim Hortons, it's 3-4, I guess. So it's very different. The companies that own Burger King franchisees are massive companies, and that's probably the largest one that they just bought. So it's all about control. They want to modernize their fleet of restaurants. And it's much easier to just get rid of the middle guy, really. And these restaurants are becoming corporate. And as McDonald's have learned, when you're corporate, it's much easier to control and roll out new strategies. That's basically it. And it's what, 1,000 restaurants? I think it's 1,000 restaurants. It's a lot of restaurants.
Well, there's no question that franchising is a way to scale quickly, right? Like we're going to talk about some restaurants concepts coming to Canada actually that are scaling quite quickly, and I know several. But once they get to a certain point, the company's as big as you are, kind of thing. So it gets to be interesting. Let's talk about the CEBA loan payment coming due. The bell tolls for thee. We had our guest on Kelly Higginson a while ago, warning about the imminent deadline. They've been lobbying. She's with Restaurants Canada, of course. Yeah, I see they're still hoping for a last-minute reprieve, but it's hard to see. It wasn't in the FES. So what kind of impact do you think? I mean, they're playing out the Chicken Little scenario where that's 50% could be in deep trouble. What kind of real impact do you see?
Well, it's unfortunate, but I mean, you gotta. At some point, you gotta move on. I mean, I know many, and I actually met with someone from Restaurants Canada recently for coffee, and my message was pretty simple. I mean, many companies have actually paid their loans back. What do you say to them? I mean, they've actually done their work, and I mean, if your model doesn't allow you to absorb this loss or this loan, maybe your business is not viable. I mean, that's how I mean, it may sound harsh, especially for restaurant operators, but at some point, you got to move on. So I actually kind of agree that one delay was enough. I mean, there was one delay already, but I think it's time for companies to face the facts and deal with this issue, or else it's going to be delayed and delayed and delayed again.
Well, there's lots of international companies that are liking the Canadian market. Restaurant concepts from the U.S. See Canada apparently is a great market. Jimmy John's, fast, fabulous sandwiches, part of the Inspire brands. Do you know Inspire brands? They're an umbrella brand over Dunkin', Baskin-Robbins, Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Sonic, and now this they've announced Jimmy John's going to come into Canada. Naan and Kebab, an Afghan Middle Eastern restaurant. Talking about there
are lots of new entrants for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Canadians are, the thing is, Canadians are curious, and so it's a good place, especially Toronto. Toronto is a good place to test the market. When it comes to entertainment, this, lots of musicals actually start in Toronto. Same for, I mean, and in restaurants, and Matty Matheson did say that when he won his Emmy on Monday night. Restaurants are like Hollywood, right? It's all about entertaining people and make them feel happy.
It's called service for a reason. It's called a show for a reason. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Canada is always a good place. And so McDonald's actually has picked Canada as a lab as well in the past to test certain products. So I do think that, because we got the rural, we got the urban, we got everything. We got the
diverse country, pretty diverse population.
It's very multicultural.
Yep.
And so it's a great place to test products, and so chains coming into Canada will absolutely try Ontario and then move on, and which is great to see.
All right. Well, let's take a break from the news. Let's get to our fantastic interview with Alison Sunstrum coming right up right now.
We have a special guest this week, someone who I met a few years ago. I've been in awe with her work. She's a legend. She's a legend in the tech entrepreneurship field. She's an investor, a community builder. Alison Sunstrum, based out of Calgary. Alison, welcome to the Food Professor podcast.
Thank you, Sylvain. I'm so excited.
So, listen, we could talk about a whole lot of different things with you. We can talk about what you're seeing out there with female entrepreneurship. You're involved with many different funds. But let's talk about building capacity in the agri-food sector and CDL. You and I, we're involved with the Creative Destruction Lab out of the University of Calgary. We meet several times a year to support companies. You're the go-to person. You're kind of the Yoda around the table. We work together. It's just been a phenomenal experience. So I guess to start things off, how did you get into this business? How did you become Alison Sunstrum we all know today?
My co-founder and I founded a data acquisition analytics company looking at how to improve market potential, how to improve environmental impact of animal agriculture. And that took us on quite a journey. We scaled our company around the world. At one time, we had more than 60 relationships with universities and governments in almost every continent. Anywhere there are people, there is agriculture. And what I learned through this, and it was almost a 30-year journey of love and patience and passion and really worrying about how you keep your company alive. I started thinking when I divested my company to a UK private wealth firm, I started thinking, so you're successful, what do you do next? And the what do you do next is, I've always been frustrated that agriculture does not have the kind of je ne sais quoi that you might have in the Netherlands. If you live in the Netherlands, you know that food is important, agriculture is important, and the Dutch stand up and say, we are an agricultural nation. Now, we in Canada have all this massive land. We have access to so many things, a solid, sane, political, or at least a solid, sane at times, political environment.
I was going to say.
But we really have advantages that we don't necessarily develop well.
Or
And
embraced. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really concerned about that, Sylvain. I'm concerned that in Canada,
I know that. Yeah.
we're not as entrepreneurial as we could be. We are not as productive as we could be. I read a study the other day that said that Canadians are about 70% productive compared to an average American. Oh my, what's happening in our country? So those are some things that I was thinking about. As a founder, I thought about two things. The one thing that I thought about was, I wonder what kind of company I could have grown if somebody could have helped me along the way. And rather than learning and making all my own mistakes, and failure is a good teacher, but it takes time. What could I have learned if I had had a mentor that could have helped me scale globally, or a group of mentors? And the second thing was, I really think that we have an unfair bias to who gets funded in the venture capital world today. And so I really started down the road of looking at that. And I spent some time, once that I divested my business, I spent some time going back to school to skill up. I offered some professors around the world that I thought were doing a good job. I offered them a grad student if they'd let me audit some of their classes, do a few things. I needed to learn more about new technologies like blockchain, new technologies like AI. And so I spent some time really learning from a perspective. I wasn't going to be an AI developer, but what potential it could bring. And then I started thinking about the new technologies that could be deployed in agriculture. So I invested in the Creative Destruction Lab as a founding partner to stand up the ag stream.
And that was about 5-6 years ago-ish?
Well, we're into our fourth cohort.
Okay.
And we really started the process, and CDL is a fantastic opportunity for founders, but it's also a great way to grow the opportunities within agriculture. We started the ag stream. It's now
Alison, could you explain to our listeners what is CDL? You are our first guest involved with CDL, so perhaps you could help our listeners understand what the process looks like, who's involved, etc.
So, Creative Destruction Lab came out of the University of Toronto, and Dr. Ajay Agrawal and several of his colleagues. Ajay is really the leading force behind CDL. He and some entrepreneurs that had some success got together and said, what kind of an accelerator could we create in Canada that would really broach new technologies? And they started perhaps one of the first really deep AI opportunities. Dr. Jeffrey Hinton, who I consider to be the father of AI, was out of the University of Toronto. Some of our best spin-outs and some of the best AI researchers, entrepreneurs have come out of the University of Toronto. They developed a program, and they took a very, very disciplined approach to create an accelerator program that enables entrepreneurs to have access for almost an 8-month period and beyond, but an 8-month period where through set meetings with objective setting criteria, they are brought into the lab and have access to mentors that have scaled their businesses to success, and access to scientific mentors like yourself, Sylvain, that really have a joy and interest in helping entrepreneurs grow. Those entrepreneurs that have deep science and tech opportunity across many streams, from space to quantum to AI and now to agriculture. And that program started with the thought that you must be connected to a top-tier business school. Entrepreneurs do not have to pay to join the program, but they have to qualify and set the bar highly in that they want to scale a company that can grow massively. We meet every 4 weeks to 8 weeks to review their business plans, their thoughts, their problems, their challenges. The companies are given legal support and access to an MBA or similar to help them achieve their objectives. I think it's one of the best programs, and it's scaled around the world now. We have 18 locations that are connected to top-tier business schools in Paris, France, London, Oxford, Berlin, Estonia, and it's a superb way for Canadian entrepreneurs to get top world-class mentorship and support.
Before I throw it back to Michael, I just wanted to know what drives you like every day, because you're involved with so many in so many projects, including CDL. What really drives you to help companies, launch companies on a day-to-day basis?
So, quite frankly, getting my company to the point of exit was perhaps the most taxing thing I've ever done in my entire life. It took a lot of devotion and passion, and I can't even imagine having done anything different. But I was highly frustrated. And I would say that if you talk to any successful entrepreneur, we all have this kind of chip on our shoulder. Should have been easier, and maybe it shouldn't have been. But, if you are successful, you don't come out of some of these kind of grinding experiences without a few bruises. And my bruises were, why could I not get money as a woman? Or why did it not come as easily to me as others? Why did I have to leave home to be a success? Why couldn't I have been a success in Canada? And we tend to do that to our entrepreneurs, and this is why we have a brain drain. We need to make sure that we are embracing innovation in Canada. We need to adopt technology first and foremost, and that doesn't happen in Canada. So I guess I tried golf, Sylvain, for about a week, and I just sucked. And I realized that the one thing that I had a lot of was some excellent contacts, relationships, business relationships around the world. I had the good fortune to work with many stellar universities and researchers, and also the opportunity to work with some of the world's best corporations. Having that experience and passing it on. And, people can take your advice or not, and that's fine. But trying to demonstrate that there are ways to finance your business, scale your business, grow from cash flow. In other words, make a business sale. And that's where I get my pleasure. That's exactly where I get my joy.
That's great.
There's a lot to follow up on the introduction. Thanks for the overview. I mean, Sylvain and I have done work trying to understand and speak to a lot of female founders. So I want to pick up on that point specifically. We had Katie Holtz on a while ago. We've had many female founders. Talk more about the different culture that's involved in venture capital and funding that inhibits funding. And that's not a Canadian issue by any means.
No.
Talk about the culture that underpins that, and then I want to talk about technology. So let's talk about female founders and your perspectives and what can happen better.
So I'm interested in funding diverse founders. So that's anyone that's been underrepresented in the current venture capital market. And venture capital is sort of a sidebar to private equity, where you're investing private money into a company at a very early stage.
Right.
Now, traditionally, venture capital has only funded right from the time it started, and it really only started in the 1990s. Mm-hmm. And female founders have, since venture capital began, and even up to today, have received less than 2% of all venture capital funding.
But have an incredible track record of success, of exits and developing companies that last. So what's the paradox? What's causing the paradox here?
It's because I get into trouble quite a bit by leveling my thoughts on it, but there's a great.
Nobody's listening, Alison. You go ahead.
No, I think a lot of people listen. There's a great big white bull elephant in the room. And that great big white elephant likes to invest in people that are just like them. And that creates a society that's just like them. Mm-hmm. So diversity is diversity and inclusion. If you're going to operate around the world,
it's a superpower. It's really a superpower when it comes to.
You bet it's a superpower, but it's also, if you're not going to be able to access funding, you're going to have to be able to figure out how to grow your business. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it would be like Business 101 if we were actually looking at it. But if you think that venture capital funding to women is bad, be an entrepreneur of color and you will get less money. So if you are an entrepreneur of color, you're going to get less money than females or than women. And so what's wrong with our society when we do that? But if you take a look at the Silicon Valley culture, and this is not across all VCs, of course, but you're going to see that there's a very homogenous group that are currently doing funding. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you why it's going to shift if we get smart enough. Right now in the United States, more than 50% of wealth is controlled by white women. In Canada, by 2030, a great percentage of wealth will be, it's over 50% of wealth will be controlled by Canadian women. So what we need to do is make sure that Canadian women know how to invest their money, not just donate it. And we all need to be a more inclusive culture because that just creates a much more inclusive society. So you break it down, it's really dollars and cents.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the technology that you're excited about. You mentioned a few things. What's really got you excited about innovation and technology that you see that you would fund, that you'd put your money down on? There's a lot of hype. How do you sort the signal from the noise, and where would you put your dollar?
Okay, so if we look at agriculture, and I am putting my dollars here. So I very much have 4 areas that I invest in. The first is biotechnology. I would say that by 2030, 60% of our physical inputs could be bioengineered. Now, yeah, that's huge. We could see agriculture add another $2 trillion per year through alternative products that are now currently chemically manufactured or elsewise through bioengineering. We are going to reduce our climate footprint if we undertake total transformation. I'm very interested in the biotech space, deeply interested in gene editing. I think that over many years, and Sylvan has talked about this on other editions of his podcast, but sort of the whole craziness around GMO and other things. We are seeing that gene editing, which is not inserting foreign DNA into a product, but actually just, let's say, putting evolution on steroids to get us to the point that we can fix some things we've screwed up in the past through gene editing and other technologies, which are essentially safe and really not an issue for us. Now, we do have to look at consumer acceptance of it and all sorts of things, but the promise is huge. The second aspect that I'm very interested about is the digitization of the farm and trying to make farming more profitable. If farming is not profitable, it is not sustainable. And there are ways by using different digital tools, using the most technology we can to perhaps do the least physical work, but also to create a more environmentally friendly type of farming. The third thing I'm looking at is advancements in robotics, as you mentioned, robotics and cobotics. So in other words, matching human with making humans stronger through different methods with robotics.
Yeah, we see that in the warehouses, like augmented lifting technologies and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Augment the human to make life a little more pleasant on the farm. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at things for repurposing of waste. The second company that we invested in was a company that takes biodegradable or bio-based compounds and turns it into a plastic replacement. I'm also interested in advanced transportation logistics. I'm interested in advanced packaging. I've been very involved in a company that can keep animal protein on the shelf for up to 24 months without refrigeration. And I would say that Sylvain, before I even tried it, Sylvain actually tried out the product and fed it to his kids.
That's right.
Actually, Felix was on our podcast, I believe it was 6 months ago.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
But those are the kind of ideas, whether or not they get invested in, but they're transformational. They could have an impact that's huge.
You know, you talked about the delta in Canada between productivity, but what does it take in terms of investment risk taking to get Canada culturally and entrepreneurs here, so we don't lose people here? Is it around building communities? I think that's a pretty important part of what you do. You've created and you're funding and doing all this great work. What role is building a community around the entrepreneurs and the food industry play?
If we have a healthy, I think community is one of the most important things that we have to address. The pandemic probably highlighted that more than anything. Having a strong community was the savior for many, many people that were left behind in the pandemic or could have been left behind. I think that community, and I look at our community as being Canada. I don't look provincially. I look very, very much, we are Canadians, and we have a responsibility for the next generations and beyond. And agriculture plays a really, really big part of that. The rural communities that we have in Canada are kind of disregarded when we think about big cities, but urban Canada or rural Canada has really created how we've grown this country.
This rural urban divide. Sorry to interrupt you, Alison, but I'm curious. I know that you're very passionate about this issue. Do you think things are getting worse when you look at the urban rural divide and economic development in our regions? Do you think things are actually getting worse in our country?
I never think that things are getting worse. They're just a fashion of what happened before. Mm-hmm. Let's think about that, and that's where I say digitization. You can work anywhere now. You could create a company in many places as long as it's digital. We do have big transportation bottlenecks that are problematic. We have some limitations, but creativity and innovation could overcome those. So the factory of the future, that bioengineered factory of the future, doesn't necessarily have to be in downtown Toronto, and it's probably the worst place for it. So maybe we have to start thinking about what the future is going to look like. And AI is forcing us to do that. Robotics are taking over tasks that used to be very human. And I think that maybe we have to think about how are we going to reshape our human community in the face of these new technologies. And I'm not scared of it at all.
In terms of the future, I mean, I know that you're quite optimistic and you think that we can change things and we can support our farmers and our economy overall. But what do you see as really the main roadblock to allow entrepreneurs to really, do well in Canada and elsewhere? What's the main roadblock that you would point at this point?
Okay, well, we have a few. Regulatory is one, definitely. Provincial boundaries that are unreasonable and don't fit in a trade world like today. We also have some lobbying forces that I think need to understand the reality of the world. I was just talking to a friend and he said, We have this wall where on one side we have farmers, on the other side we have the government. And I said, well, there's another side that's forgotten about, and that side is there's a lot of money to be made in agriculture. There is incentives we could put in place so people would adopt new technology in Canada. We're not using our financial levers well. We're relying on the past. And so in many ways, I think that we just have to be more sophisticated in our approach. That's kind of a general statement, but I really think that the creativity is out there, that we can do this. We have to get beyond the past. And that's sometimes easier said than done, but boy, it can be done. And we can see companies like SpaceX and companies like Tesla, and it's not just all Musk companies. I've got several companies out there that are transforming the world in a way that we're just all forced to come along, if you wish. So we need to also put that same kind of entrepreneurial and innovative thinking in our governments and on our farms. Maybe we can't support all farms. There is an economic reality, but maybe we have to think about how we can transform differently.
I guess to close things off here, what would be the one advice you would give to aspiring entrepreneurs out there who are looking at the food space as an opportunity to establish a startup? What would be your advice to them, to the people listening to us?
Well, the first thing is to determine your product market fit. If you actually are creating a solution that nobody wants, maybe it's because nobody wants it.
Yeah, nobody wants.
So product market fit is really important. The other thing is that you've got to be able to build your business, find customers. It's not up to the government to fund you. It's not up to venture capitals to fund you. The least expensive funding you can ever get is through a customer. And so the advice I always give entrepreneurs is it's great if you can qualify for non-dilutive funding, but really make sure you have a business and your business idea is something people really want and need. And if you're solving that kind of problem, wow, you're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. That's the one question I hear a lot at CDL when we're both around the table, and we all often question, what's the business here? And you do see a lot of entrepreneurs come forward. They're dreamers. We love the energy, but the model is not clear, and so that's when you really see how the program can help them, for sure.
Yeah. And then I'd say it's probably the best way in the world to have a happy life. If you can create something you built yourself, there's nothing you'll ever be more proud of, especially if it solves an environmental problem, a really big world grand challenge, then you've got a great opportunity.
Well, what a fantastic interview. Great insights. And, I can't imagine a better way to discuss the current environment. So, Alison, thanks so much for joining us here. Sylvain, on behalf of Sylvain and I on the Food Professor podcast, it was really great to have you on and get your perspective and for joining us on the podcast.
Nice
Thank
to
you,
see
Alison.
you. Take care.
At the risk of becoming the Deadly Product Recall podcast, Quaker Oats has announced they're recalling some of their oats. I don't know who got the message, but apparently you as a Costco shopper got the memo. So tell me about that.
Oh, yeah. And many Costco shoppers did get a phone call on Saturday night of all nights. We thought we were special, and we were even more special as a member, I guess. Yeah. And so I thought, like I've always, and this, we did talk about this with the cantaloupe incident. Mm-hmm. With Quaker, I mean, you're looking at a massive recall. And what was really weird about this one is that, I mean, you're covering 6 months of production for 38 different products.
Jeez.
That's a lot of product. And so, I mean, Pepsi, I think one household in 5 in Canada will actually have at least one Pepsi product. And so you want to make sure when there is a recall, and there was no hospitalization, there was no incident.
What is it, salmonella again? Like, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah,
salmonella.
My guess is that that Quaker conducted an audit at one of their ingredient suppliers, and they saw something.
You'd hope they would. You'd hope they would.
So, and they saw a flaw, they saw a problem, and they decided to recall all of their products that would contain that ingredient. We don't know which ingredient, but because there was no incident reported, no deaths, no hospitalization, nobody getting sick. Got the call, went to Costco, got my $9.
Isn't that great?
And I was asked to actually put my box on top of many other boxes. I was not the first one. My box was half full, by the way, and so
maybe the government should outsource their alert system to Costco. They seem to be better at it.
You think?
You
think? Yeah, exactly.
Save lives. Use Costco to run.
We're
an
talking
alert
about
system.
a processed product with Quaker, but absolutely, you're right. With produce, anything that's eaten raw is certainly a dangerous thing when there's a recall. So absolutely, I think we need to think differently about some of these recalls for sure. But I was actually quite impressed with Costco's approach, and I know that Loblaws with its PC Optimum program have done that in the past. I don't know it was as targeted than Costco's, because Costco was basically, if you bought this product, I'm calling you because you actually bought this product. In Loblaw's case, I believe it was romaine lettuce, but my understanding is that they actually did notify basically almost everybody, saying, you know what, you may actually have bought this product.
Everybody they knew, right? I mean, Costco knows everybody who shops with them. Of course, it's membership-based, and then if you use a loyalty card or some other license plate, then, that's how Loblaw got a hold of us and told us to throw out.
In Costco's case, I don't know if someone got the call but didn't buy the Quaker product. I don't know, but
I wouldn't think so. They know who buys everything. They just run a list.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody who shops at Costco has to.
So Loblaws has to start charging $50 to everyone shopping at Loblaws,
or just get everybody to use their loyalty program, their Optimum program, which
exactly. Or that, yeah, absolutely,
or that,
yes.
or that. Don't make trouble now. Don't make trouble. All right,
Loblaws not in trouble. I'm not in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about, speaking of trouble, let's talk about your meeting. I think you had today with Canada Royal Milk based in Kingston. So we've talked about them, not always in the best context in terms of what's happening in Kingston, where they're making and manufacturing baby formula for export.
Yeah.
What happened? I guess you agitated them enough that they wanted to talk to you. So tell us all about what happened.
Here's what happened. I think in the fall they decided they had enough. They decided to actually hire a PR agency out of Ottawa, and the PR agency basically has started to coach Canada Royal Milk. And that's when I got the invite from the general manager, Mr. Jihong Han.
Mm-hmm.
And so that PR firm actually booked the meeting between him and I, and we actually had the meeting today. It was actually nice. I was actually expecting an interpreter, to be honest, but his English was actually impeccable.
Fantastic.
Impeccable. I was actually,
and it was a Zoom meeting, right? It was not.
Yeah, it was a Zoom meeting. I couldn't. I was invited obviously to meet with him in Kingston, but I couldn't make it.
And was he in Kingston or was he somewhere?
I was in Kingston in the facility. Yeah. Okay. So I took a bunch of notes. I basically asked all of the questions I have posted on X a while back. He was quite open, I think. So he did confirm that the facility is in operation. He actually has 177 employees. He actually repacks for Lactalis.
Really?
I did not know that.
Really?
So, yes.
Hey, wait a minute. So these 177 employees, there was some thread that they weren't local folks from Kingston. Is that the case, or was that just
16 nationalities work there, and the Chinese are a minority. Okay. That's what I was told. All right. And so they're not all Chinese nationals.
Okay.
The other thing that I learned, so both Beatrice, as you know, both Beatrice and Lactancia brands are owned by Lactalis. My guess is that, so what I understand is that their milk surpluses were rewarded towards the plant in Kingston, and Lactalis actually charged Canada Royal Milk with the task of packing fluid milk for them. So this milk has been sold on a Canadian market for a while now, without us knowing. It is Canadian milk, so that's what's.
Okay, hold on a second. Are we talking powdered milk? What do you mean packed?
Liquid milk.
Liquid, like it put in a bag, like we'd have. It could be in that plant as well as the baby, because they are. If you could confirm, they are making baby formula as they originally intended for export.
So they don't have the license yet. They were supposed, so they got the approval. They have received the approval from Health Canada for baby formula, but they haven't gotten the approval from CFIA. It was actually supposed to happen today. The inspection was supposed to happen today, but it's happening on Friday. And once approved, and they expect that to happen within the next few weeks, they will start manufacturing baby formula for the Canadian market with Canadian milk.
For the Canadian market. For the Canadian market.
So this actually contradicts many reports that we've seen from media.
What do you mean many? All. Every report.
Going back to 2017, because all of them were saying this plant was actually designed for China.
Yeah.
Between you and I, Michael,
and the listeners,
I think plans changed due to some political pressure. Now, I did ask about subsidies, so it was confirmed that Ontario, paid for some of it to build the plant. About $20 million was actually sent by Ottawa to build the plant as well. That's part of a unique program I was explaining. So both Ottawa and Queen's Park were involved with the financing of the plant, but the bulk of it is really fair out of China. And the other thing, of course, that I should mention is that they are planning to export baby formula to the U.S.
All right.
In the fall.
Listen. I mean, what you've described is kind of what I would expect.
I mean, it was quite open, and but you do question, why do we need the Chinese to build a plant like this in Canada? One, two. In the fall, they're planning to export baby formula to the U.S. Well, that's Canadian milk.
Don't we have a shortage of baby formula? Isn't there a shortage of baby formula in Canada on the show?
I know.
Isn't that still a bit of a thing? Maybe the listeners can chime in and tell us if
I'm hearing reports here and there, but I don't think the situation is as bad, because at some point I suspect that parents kind of got used to it, because it's almost 2 years now. Yeah. It's almost 2 years. And so it's been a while.
Wow.
And so my guess is that there are going to be, but my question, I mean, milk production in Canada is partially subsidized, and the quota system is for the domestic market. So how does that work? But the one thing I did learn, or at least he was able to confirm with me, is that the Dairy Farmers of Ontario, they do have a deal with the plant, and it was often denied by dairy farmers, but they do have a deal. Now, they also have a deal with goat milk producers as well. And they're actually making powdered milk for adults. So, and the brand name is Caprice. And the brand name for the baby formula that's going to be coming out in the spring from that plant is called Niuriss, Niuriss.
Well, you had a very, what sounds like a fact-filled, very productive meeting. So thanks for sharing.
I did thank Canada Royal Milk for meeting with me. I am the first person they've met. They haven't talked to media yet. They haven't talked to anybody, but I think that's going to change. And I think they should be doing that. I actually did ask the question, are you concerned about Canadians looking at your Chinese-owned plant manufacturing Canadian milk? I mean, are you concerned about that? And he said, yes, we're concerned, absolutely. And because, I mean, he knows, like, I think he really is, he was very much aware of what was going on here, which is probably why we were talking in the first place.
Well, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, listening to this podcast. Breaking news. There you go. That's right. Breaking news. You heard it here first. So tune in. If you don't subscribe, for goodness sake, subscribe. We'll continue to bring you those kind of breaking news and insights. Now, you mentioned this earlier on in the podcast. I kind of let it slide because I wanted to do a big congrats to Canadian chef, restaurateur, entrepreneur, author, TV producer, Matty Matheson.
St. John's native. St. John's native.
Fort Erie, lives in Fort Erie, just outside of Niagara. Won an Emmy for one of my favorite shows, The Bear. Are you a fan of The Bear, the show?
I think more people watch The Bear than the Emmys.
Well, it's true, but have you watched the show?
No.
Oh my goodness, you'd love it.
I know. You told me to watch it, but I haven't. I got to say, Matty Matheson was adorable on stage.
Yeah, you got a big kiss. He's making headlines. You got a big kiss from one of his co-actors. Yeah. And Matty. If you don't know Matty Matheson, we'll put a link. Check him out. We met him at Seattle here in Toronto. He launched a food line. So
well, you met him. I didn't meet him at all. But he's larger. He's a larger than life kind of guy. You could tell.
He's larger than life. And shout out if the Matty Matheson people are listening, because we're trying to get him on the pod. And
actually, I was surprised he wasn't a tuxedo, to be honest. I think it's probably a rule that they have at the Emmys.
Well, I'm not that surprised. He's an influencer for Harry Rosen, right? He wears suits for Harry Rosen.
Is he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
He's got more going on than a Chinese milk plant in Kingston. That fella.
Kingston, Ontario.
Kingston, Ontario. Yes. All right, well, listen, let's leave it all there with a great episode. It's great to reconnect with you. We're both moving around, and we're doing it for you, people. We're kind of figuring out what the heck's going on, trying to explain it. I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth consultant, podcaster, keynote speaker, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
All right, everybody, have a great week, and we'll be back with you next week. Until then, safe travels.